And we are live streaming now as well. So folks on online, whether you're on YouTube or Zoom, if you do have questions, certainly leave that in the chat. If you're on Zoom, you can, just get my attention or raise your little virtual hand or unmute and just ask your question when it's appropriate to do so. Not during meditation, obviously. Hello, everybody. Welcome to those of you just joining. Let's see, who have I not said hi to? Dinesh, Rainey, Randy, hi, Anne, Heen, hello. Oh, Bob, I can't remember if I said hi to you yet. Casey, here's Robbie. We'll get started in just a minute. Good to see everyone tonight.
Testing. Okay. I sent you the homework this afternoon. Okay. Try and get it to you ahead of time.
Awesome. Yeah, I posted 2 years ago, which was the same. So
Yeah.
I had it.
Yeah.
I had
Okay.
it posted last
Yeah.
night.
It's all. It's yes.
It's
I'm
all
just
good,
changing
Robbie.
the date on it.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you, though.
Let's see, do I have a clock?
Oh, sorry. I'll grab that.
Yes, please. Thank you. Okay. Okay, do you have any announcements, Linda, before we start?
No, we were chatting a little bit before you got here.
Okay,
So I think we're all
we're
good.
about on time. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our second class in the module, Mind and Its Potential. See, do we have anyone in the room tonight who wasn't here last week? Okay, a bunch of people. Okay, glad to have you. We didn't really cover a lot of material last week, so I think you'll be able to catch up with us without any problems. Let's start with some meditation. A lot of us have had a busy Monday, and we can set that aside and bring our mind into a more quiet and focused place. We begin by checking our posture. We discussed that last week, but I'll just run through it. Back is a little bit straighter than you normally sit, not rigid or tight, but a little bit straighter. Spine is somewhat extended. Your head is maybe just a couple degrees in front of the vertical, but not leaning to one side or the other and not slumped forehead forward. Your eyes are either just lightly closed or just very slightly open so that a little bit of light comes in and keeps you stimulated. Mouth is lightly closed, not clenched. Tongue is on the hard palate behind our upper teeth. Our shoulders are relaxed and down and slightly open, shoulders back a little bit, so that our chest is completely open. Upper arms are away from our torso, and we have our right hand on left, with thumbs touching slightly below the level of the navel. If we're sitting in a chair, our feet are flat on the floor, and it's fine to put a cushion underneath your feet if that helps, but don't lean back in the chair. If you're on the floor on a cushion, you're towards the front third of the cushion so that your pelvis is open a little bit and your legs are in a position that you find stable and comfortable. So take a moment, scan your body going from your head on down, identify any sources of discomfort or tension, and address those now so they won't become a recurring distraction during the meditation that follows. And now we take 3 deep breaths from the abdomen, the stomach expanding on the in-breath, so our diaphragm is pulled down and our lungs are completely filled, and then our stomach contracts towards our spine on the out-breath. And we do that just 3 times. And now we allow our breathing to return to its normal pattern. And we begin by setting our motivation. And as much as possible, even though it seems maybe a little forced or effortful, we think about the bodhicitta motivation, the great mind motivation, the motivation that everything I do, including this simple meditation for the next few minutes, is done so that I can develop my positive qualities and be of greater benefit to others. So that's not the way we normally think. So we have to kind of wrench our mind around that. And having set our motivation, we now begin the actual meditation. Our chosen object of meditation, what we're becoming familiar with, to use the Tibetan definition of meditation, is the physical sensation of the breath moving in and out through our nostrils. Nothing more, nothing less than that. Air moving in, air moving out. We're not describing it to ourselves. We're not visualizing it. We're not even counting our breaths. We're just placing concentration directly on that experience so that we can say that the mind and the breath become as one. They are of the same nature. And as will inevitably happen when our mind wanders off to another object, we're not harsh with ourselves. We don't beat ourselves up. We just set that aside and come back to the breath over and over and over again. And that's the meditation. It's said if you sit through the meditation and your mind wanders from one object to another, but you bring yourself back to the breath just one time, you've accomplished something positive, that you have meditated. And we can end our meditation by doing a dedication. We acknowledge that we've accomplished something positive by sitting like this for a few minutes. It's made a positive imprint on our mind stream. And we think, may that positive energy not be lost, but may it grow and ripen in a way that it benefits all living beings. Okay. Any comments or questions about that meditation? Okay. Pretty straightforward, but not necessarily easy. Okay, so tonight we'll begin the actual material of the class. We're talking about mind, and I'll use the words mind and consciousness interchangeably. Again, we're dealing with translations from the Sanskrit, the original teachings of the Buddha, sometimes through Tibetan into not very good English. So sometimes the words aren't the best, but I think those two we can use interchangeably, mind and consciousness. I'll also use the word awareness in the general sense of referring to mind and consciousness, but awareness is really more about the function of the mind, and we'll talk about that a little bit tonight. So this is not something that the Buddha said you had to believe. He said this is just his observations. When he sat under the Bodhi tree and looked at his own mind, he said, after much thought and meditation and observation, this is what he saw when he looked at his mind. And his teachings are always given with the caveat of test them against your own experience. So this is we all come equipped with a mind, so we got everything we know that we need to test the Buddha's teachings against. Does it jive with my experience? Do I see the same things as he saw when I look? And there's no requirement that you see things the same way he did, but he's just saying, I saw this, I found it beneficial, I'm going to share it with you. I found that understanding my mind in this way made me happier, okay? It made me suffer less. And these teachings, as I talked about last week, are really the kind of the groundwork for everything that follows in Buddhism. Is based on an understanding of the mind and some of its characteristics. So the Buddha observed three things about the mind, three characteristics that the mind had, and he also observed its function. So we'll go through the three characteristics and the one function tonight. And the first thing he saw about his mind, first thing he said is, it is completely non-physical. Okay, when we talk about mind and consciousness, we're talking about a non-physical aspect of our existence. This is a really interesting concept to think about. Sometimes we think of brain being the mind, and the Buddha said, no, the brain is physical, the mind is non-physical. Certainly there's connections between the brain and the mind, but they are not the same thing, and it's a mistake to assume that they are the same thing. So the mind or consciousness is completely non-physical. And we all have a sense of that, but have we really thought about what that means? I mean, it kind of implies that the mind is not subject to any physical rules. If it's a non-physical phenomena, how can it be subject to physical rules? For example, and I don't have the answers to this, if I'm thinking about the Eiffel Tower and I have a really clear picture of the Eiffel Tower in my mind, is my mind here in Raleigh, North Carolina, or is it in Paris, France? I mean, where exactly is my mind at that point? Another thing, can the mind be in two places at the same time? If it's non-physical, maybe that's a possibility. I'm not saying it's true, but these are the kind of things you think about when you start to think about this non-physical aspect of our being. We have a body, which includes a brain and a heart and skin and our other organs, which is completely physical, subject to the laws of physical matter. But then we have this other aspect of ourself, mind or consciousness, which is completely non-physical, okay? And it's the temporary coming together of those two, of the physical body and the non-physical mind, that makes up this being that we just label as Robbie, okay? He's got physical aspects, he's got non-physical aspects. Okay, so that's the first thing the Buddha said about the mind. It's completely non-physical. Okay, it interacts with physical things, with the brain and the rest of the body. You know, the heart pumping blood has to be there for the mind to function in certain ways, but the mind is a non-physical phenomena with everything that implies. Okay? It can't be found if we dissect the body. Mind or consciousness cannot be put on a table and looked at, but we have it with us, okay? So we can look at it there, but it's not something physical that we're looking at. It's just that continued awareness that interacts with everything around us. That's what we're talking about when we talk about mind or consciousness. Okay, so that's the first characteristic, non-physical, which implies a lot of interesting things. The second characteristic, he said, is the mind or consciousness that each of us have, this non-physical aspect of our being, is without beginning and is without end. Okay? For every moment of consciousness, of being aware, you can find a previous moment of consciousness. You can find a previous moment of consciousness to that. You can go back, and if your memory's good enough, you can trace it back to maybe when you were 3 years old. Okay? Then you get to a point where you don't remember it. But it certainly doesn't imply, we certainly assume we had a mind from the moment we were born till our first memory that we've retained. We can always find a previous moment. And even before our consciousness met with this body, according to the Buddha, there was a previous moment, and so this leads to the idea of reincarnation or rebirth, which is not really the subject of this course, but yet we have to touch on a little bit, that this consciousness goes back through time. There is no beginning that can be found. There is always a previous moment of consciousness. And throughout all that time, this consciousness has been associated with different physical bodies, okay? There's a temporary coming together of the physical body and the consciousness, which we refer to as a lifetime, okay? At the moment of death, the physical body begins to decay, but the consciousness continues on, and then through various processes, which we'll talk about more in the module on death and dying, the consciousness hooks up with another body, another form, okay? So we can go all the way back. We can't find a first moment of consciousness. There was always a previous moment of consciousness. Because the Buddha said, the Western view is that the consciousness, and I think neuroscience is really just starting to look at this over the last 20 years, trying to figure out what consciousness is or addressing the subject. The Western point of view is somehow it comes into existence at some point after the sperm and the egg are developed, and somehow the zygote or the fetus or the embryo or the newly born child develops a consciousness. And the Buddhist point of view is that doesn't make any sense because consciousness is non-physical. So how could something non-physical come from physical phenomena like that? A non-physical phenomena can only come from a previous non-physical phenomena, according to Buddhist logic, okay? So consciousness always had to come from a previous moment of consciousness. It couldn't come from a sperm and an egg, okay? The sperm and the egg give us our physical body. Our consciousness comes from previous moments of consciousness, okay? So a lot of interesting implications there. One right off the bat is, our parents didn't create us, okay? They gave us our body and they raised us, but they did not give us our consciousness. Our consciousness has been part of this continual progression through countless previous lifetimes. The implication is that we've experienced everything in the past. And in the same way, going forward, when we die, the Buddhist point of view is that's the separation of the body and consciousness. That's what death is. The body is a very impermanent physical phenomenon. It decays, but the consciousness continues on, okay? And there is no end in the future, because this moment of consciousness will always lead to the next moment of consciousness, leads to the next moment of consciousness. There is no way it can cease or go out of existence. In the same way, there's no first moment where it came into existence. Okay, so consciousness is without beginning and without end. Okay, a lot of implications there also. The third characteristic that the Buddha described, looking at his mind, he said the ultimate nature of the mind is clear, is clarity. Okay, the mind itself is clear, like crystal clear water. Now, who looking at their mind this evening would say their mind is perfectly clear? Okay, we don't see that. What we're looking at is the thoughts that occur in the mind. Okay, the thoughts can be very unclear. There can be a lot of anger. There can be a lot of depression. There can be jealousy. There can also be good thoughts that make us happy: love, compassion, patience. But those are just those are not the nature of the mind. Okay, we could think of those are temporary thoughts that occur in this continuum without beginning and end. There are countless mind moments, some of which are negative and cause problems for ourselves and others which are positive, which make us happy and allow us to help others. But those thoughts are not the nature of the mind, the ultimate nature of the mind. And this is really, this is what allows us to become enlightened. The fact that our mind is ultimately clear. We tend to think that we are our thoughts, okay? That I have a lot of angry thoughts and I am an angry person, okay? And the Buddha would say, you do have a lot of angry thoughts, but that is not who you are as a person. That is not what your mind is. And he said the good news is that you can replace the thoughts that make you unhappy, that limit you, that cause problems for yourself and others, with thoughts that make you happy, thoughts that allow you to help others, thoughts that are peaceful and non-disturbing, because none of the thoughts are the fixed way you are. Okay, they're just temporary blips in this consciousness, one after another, incredibly fast, so that we don't even see most of them. But none of them are fixed, none of them are permanent, none of them are none of them are what your mind ultimately is. It's like you have a jar of water and you put some dirt in it, and you shake it up and agitate it. It looks like the water's dirty. Okay, the water looks like it's mud. You let it sit, the dirt settles out, the clear nature of the water reappears. Okay? So we can say our thoughts are like little specks of dirt or whatever in the consciousness, in this stream of consciousness, one after another. And various teachers have said all Buddhism is about learning how to replace the thoughts that cause problems with thoughts that cause happiness. It's nothing more mystical or complicated than that. That's all the Buddha is teaching. With all his teachings are just various techniques to help you set aside the negative thoughts that make you unhappy and replace them with happy thoughts. It sounds like power of positive thinking, but it's much more complex than that. You just can't sit there and say, oh, I'm just going to think happy thoughts, and fool yourself. It has to be done with great awareness. Because where do the negative thoughts come from usually? Needs not being met, yeah, okay. But from a more Buddhist point of view, why do we have angry thoughts, for example? Karma, okay? We've created the cause for those. So we have to stop creating the cause to have the thoughts that cause us problems, okay? We can't just say, oh yeah, I erase it all. It's like an Etch-a-Sketch and we just shake it once or twice and we've got a clean slate. It's more complicated, but it is a possibility. And that is what allows us to become enlightened. The fact that the mind is ultimately clear and we can develop the mind of a Buddha, each one of us, which means a mind that is completely wise, that sees reality with no delusions, and a mind that is completely compassionate, that wants others to be free of suffering, that has no thoughts but wise and compassionate thoughts. None of the other type of thoughts that disturb us, make us unhappy, cause problems for us arise. And that's the mind of a Buddha. And it's a possibility for each of us because we have this mind that's ultimate nature is clear. Or you could even say, to use a jargony word, we could say it's empty. Okay, or we could say it's like a space in which thoughts arise. Okay, but the consciousness is the space in which the thoughts arise. The consciousness is not the thoughts. Okay, so we can say I'm having angry thoughts within my clear mind. Okay, angry thoughts are arising, but I am not an angry person. I am not a depressed person. I am not this. Those are the thoughts that I'm having, and ultimately I can remove them. Okay? So 3 characteristics of mind according to the Buddha. The first, completely non-physical, and these all have interesting implications, and you can just kind of play with these ideas yourself. Mind is non-physical. It's without beginning and without end, and its ultimate nature, its real nature is clear or clarity or empty. It has no fixed qualities. Okay? 3 aspects of mind that the Buddha described. Any comments or questions at this point?
If you're here in the Kadampa,
Yeah.
a microphone will come around. Tim's got it. Tim, do you have a microphone? Can you bring it
Up here.
to Michael? And if you are online, again, you can, I see you leave, so I'll call on you in a second. And or you can type it in the chat if you are on YouTube. Just slide up.
You have to hold it
You have to
real
hold
close.
it really close.
I have a green light. Okay. Thank you. Robbie, we always say that one of the very basic and important teachings is impermanence.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that the way we describe the clear nature of mind, consciousness, and Buddha nature, that would appear to be permanent.
Oh, now you're getting into
Correct.
a real Philip. That's a good question for a Geshe. That's not listed as, when we use the word permanent in Buddhism, we're referring to or impermanence, we're referring to the fact that things change, okay? That's what impermanence is, and most phenomena are impermanent. There are very few things that don't change. Okay, so whether you can say that the clarity of the mind is permanent, i.e. unchanging, I can't answer that question, okay? That's a good question, okay? The things we tend to think of as impermanent or as permanent are empty space, which is kind of like the mind, the cessation of a negative mind state. For example, when we eliminate anger completely from our mind stream, that cessation of anger is permanent in that it doesn't change, it doesn't arise. And the third is the emptiness of a phenomena, okay? So we're getting off into, that's a good question. I don't think I can answer it, okay? But I think the fact that the content of the mind at any second is changing, okay? That's not its nature, true. So whether we can say the clarity of the mind is unchanging, I don't know. Okay, but good question.
And Robbie,
good way to think about these things.
Sorry to interrupt. We have a question online.
Okay.
Leaf, you can go ahead and unmute.
Leaf.
So this question may be premature. As I was reading our homework, I started just kind of reaching out and looking at other levels of consciousness, state of minds. So when you say, quote unquote, we are looking at, so when you're using that phrase to introduce us to the mind, the we you're talking about, is that the I, the ego, or the manas, or the store consciousness? Like where, when you say that, what are you referring to? Because it's part of the mind, but it's not the mind.
No, it's the mind looking at the mind. And they're different. We'll talk about this in one of the future classes. There are different levels of consciousness. And what we're using when we talk about consciousness in this way is what's referred to as the gross consciousness, the conceptualizing, because that's where we are. That's the way we live our lives. We can't access our subtle consciousness or our very subtle consciousness to do this kind of analysis. You know, we have to work with what we have. So we're using our gross mind to look at itself. And we'll talk about those other levels of consciousness in another class. Okay? Okay.
That picture you just painted, talking about how the mind is this space in which the thoughts are arising, was very helpful to understand that quality of it. So then what are the thoughts then? So if the mind is the space and the thoughts are coming up into that space, then are the thoughts like the different things that are in our physical world that we're interacting with?
Okay, we'll talk about that in just a minute, but it's, instead of thoughts, we could use moments of consciousness. It's anything that occurs to our mind. Okay. Deer Park water. I have to stop by the grocery store on the way home. My butt's hurting a little bit from this cushion. God, he really pissed me off at work today. Red place cloth. Anything that occurs to our mind, any thought, any conscious perception or unconscious perception, that's what we're talking about. Okay, so it could be interacting with something in the physical world around us. It could be an emotion, love, compassion, hatred. All of those are moments of consciousness. It could be a memory. It could be a plan, okay? Anything that occurs in that non-physical space. Okay. Any other? Okay. So that leads into the last point that I wanted to talk about, which is the function of the mind. And the function of the mind is to perceive, to be aware of, okay? And I mentioned, answering your question, I mentioned some of the things that we perceive. Okay, the mind perceives this, it perceives that, it is aware of this. When we have an angry thought, that's being aware of anger. When we have a kind thought, that's being aware of kindness. It's perceiving kindness. And it's so that the mind is really takes on, we are what we think, okay? Not in a permanent or fixed way, but if we have nothing but thoughts of love and compassion, we essentially are love and compassion. That is what our mind is, if it's having only those thoughts. If we train our mind so that, it said, you can train your mind so that it is impossible to perceive anger. It is impossible to perceive jealousy. That just cannot arise in your mind because you've eliminated all the causes for anger and jealousy. I think we've all met some people in our lives who seem never to have an angry thought. It just doesn't arise in their mind, okay? And we've seen people who are very loving. Thoughts of love are arising in the mind. So it's saying that we perceive those. It's and it doesn't have to be something, it can just be red, okay? Right now, my mind is perceiving the color red, okay? Mind, red. There's that interaction there. And for that moment, the consciousness and the redness are the same, okay? The mind is what it perceives, is what it's aware of. You could almost, and again, this is where some images come in helpful. You could say your mind is like a perfect mirror that reflects what it perceives, that reflects perfectly. If it's anger, it's reflecting anger. If it's love, it's reflecting love. If it's red cushion, it's reflecting red cushion. So the mind, these moments of consciousness we can refer to as a series of perceptions, a series of awareness happening one after the other. They said there's like 87,000 in a second if we look closely enough at our mind. But nothing but a lot of perceptions, one after another, occurring in this empty space, okay? Some of them make us happy. Some of them cause problems for us. Some we're relatively indifferent to. Okay, a lot of this is the result of karma, of how we've trained our mind in the past. And this is not the subject of this class, but one of the aspects of karma that will be covered in that module is if you think angry thoughts over and over again, you're training your mind to have angry thoughts. You're making it easier. You're making it easier to perceive anger. Okay? The same way, if you have a lot of loving thoughts, you're training your mind to be aware of kindness and compassion. You're making it easier. You're developing new habits, okay, or reinforcing old habits, okay? So, but the content, the thoughts, we do have the ability to replace them. It takes a lot of work to eliminate the ones that cause problems and replace them. But all we're doing is just perceiving. Everything that occurs in our consciousness is a perception of something. And the mind never goes off, okay? And this is our mind cannot go blank, okay? We can perceive blankness, but our mind is continuous. There are no gaps. Even when we're sleeping, even when we're under anesthesia, that consciousness continues at some level. And we'll talk about those various levels next week. Okay? So that's what the mind does. It perceives. It is aware of. It reflects. It interacts with in a very basic sort of way. Okay? Any questions or comments before we do another meditation? Anything on? Okay. So, take a moment and just stretch, and we'll finish up with what we call a review meditation. Okay, so take a moment, check your posture. I think everyone's familiar with that. Three deep breaths from the abdomen. And we set our motivation. And now we place our concentration on the breath for a couple minutes to allow some of my chatter to fade away and become a little bit more concentrated and focused. So mind on the breath, moving in and out through the nostrils for the next couple minutes. And now that our mind is a little bit more concentrated, a little bit more focused, we're going to do what's called a review meditation. Meditation, as we know, is defined as becoming familiar with. So using this slightly more concentrated and focused mind, we're just going to review and become familiar with the material we've covered this evening. And this may seem just like thinking, and don't let that bother you, because you are bringing your attention to the chosen object, which now we're moving the object from being the breath to the characteristics of the mind. So the first object of meditation is mind is non-physical. What does that mean? What does that imply? Is that my experience? What's the evidence show? So your concentration is placed on that idea, that descriptive. And when it wanders away to something else, you come back to that. Excuse me. And now we meditate on mind is without beginning and without end. Every moment of consciousness is preceded by a previous moment of consciousness. And every moment of consciousness will be followed by a subsequent moment of consciousness. No beginning, no end. Being non-physical, consciousness can only come from consciousness. It can't come from the physical body. It has to have come from a previous moment of consciousness. So what does this mean? What does it imply? Do I agree? Do I disagree? What's my experience show? And next we meditate on the clarity of the mind, that the ultimate nature of the mind is clear, like crystal clear water. The mind, the nature of the mind is not the thoughts. The thoughts are just temporary phenomena occurring in the space of the mind. But the nature of the mind being clear is what allows us ultimately to become enlightened. So, do we agree with that? Disagree? What does that imply? That the mind is clear. And lastly, we think about the function of the mind. What does the mind do? It perceives. It is aware. It reflects. Thought after thought after thought. Everything that we are aware of is a moment of consciousness occurring in the clarity of the mind. Some of those awarenesses make us happy. Some of them cause problems for us. But none of them are fixed or permanent. We're not stuck with any of those awarenesses. And you can do a brief dedication. Acknowledge that you've created some positive energy. Okay. Any other comments before we finish this evening? Okay, we have one back here.
So I was just wondering how we can be clear and aware at the same time.
Explain a little bit more.
Well, if I'm always perceiving, like even when I'm meditating and it's quiet and the thoughts are coming up, or I feel a pain or a ache,
Yeah.
there's always something coming up.
Yeah.
And if there's like 87,000 of those in a moment.
Yeah, and a lot of those thoughts are not clear. We're aware of them, but they're not clear. But we have to distinguish that separation between the thought and the mind, okay?
Okay.
The thoughts are occurring in the space of the mind.
Okay.
The mind is not the thought.
So the clarity is there, it's just muddled up.
Yeah, it's just, yeah. I mean, we identify with the thoughts and think that's what my mind is, okay?
Okay.
No, it's the space, the clear space in which that thought arises.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a different way of looking at things, but good question, yeah.
I'll have to think about that more.
Okay, yeah. One last question, yeah, and we'll finish up, or comment.
Okay, I think I'm coming from the perspective of where is the mind located?
Mm-hmm.
Because we said we're a union of the body and mind. So
Uh-huh.
I'm thinking my mind comes in my body.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Uh-huh.
That's not
Yeah.
true.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So the mind is not physical,
Mm-hmm.
so it can't be in a physical location.
I don't know. Does it imply that? Yeah, it may. Yeah, that may be the right answer. Yeah. These are things we have to just kind of think out. Yes. We want to concretize it and say my mind is with my body, they walk together all the time, but it's a non-physical aspect of our being. So we exist in both we have a physical and a non-physical side of us. Okay, we can't all be put into the physical part. Yeah. Okay, so the homework is going to be up online. It involves reading and meditation. And then we have 3 more classes. So see y'all next week. Yeah, I know. I feel like we're just getting started. Yeah.
Thank you, Robbie.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robbie.
What's the module after this one? Do you know?
After this is how to meditate.
Okay. Yeah. So you'll be ready for that. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you, Linda. Thank you, everybody.
I saw a question come up here.
Yeah, that's from me, Kathy. Quick question, Robbie. Can you restate the comment, the dedication or the motivation at the beginning when you said something about bodhicitta?
Yeah, the motivation, the bodhicitta motivation, which means the idea that everything we do is to become enlightened so we can benefit others. Okay, that's what the bodhicitta motivation refers to.
Okay, so everything we do is to, say that again, please?
Become enlightened to benefit others, okay?
Got it. Thank you so
Saying,
much.
I have to develop my good qualities so I can help others. And a person who's completely developed that is called a bodhisattva, okay? Which is not the same as a Buddha, but is a great, great accomplishment on the way to Buddhahood, okay?
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Great teaching tonight. See you next week.
Have a
Okay.
great night, everyone. Good night.
Thanks, Linda. Good night.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone. See you next week.
Thank you, Linda. Good night.
Good night.
You.